All right, peace. Shalom, shalom. First and foremost, giving honor and praise to the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Yaakov. Giving double honors to 7130 South Chicago that taught me this truth. Giving double honors to all the brothers and sisters that the Creator has awoken in these last days. With that being said, peace and shalom. All right, brothers and sisters, I want to go into a lesson slash discussion. And I want to be talking about a TV show or a TV series that has just aired on Netflix by the name of Primeval. And it talks about the history of basically the war between the Mormons and the United States government, and also their war against the so-called Native Americans, or what we would call the Indians today. I think that a lot of people should go and watch the TV series. I think it was very enlightful. It had a lot of history. Some of the characters are fictional, and some of the characters are real characters. So I forget the actor's name that played this character by the name of Brigham Young. He was like one of the head guys for the Mormon Church, which was the Latter Day Saints, right? So why am I talking about this TV series? It's because the Mormons, the Christians, these are really what you would call the pilgrims. And why do I say that? It's because these were the people that came from Europe during what you would call the Renaissance era, and they started to come over here to what you would call America, and they pushed a lot of their religion. They pushed a lot of their religion by the sword, and they were fighting many wars against the native indigenous people of the country. They conquered these people, and this is why we got what you would call America today. America was very bloody during her inception, and this is the reason. These people are basically the foundation of what we're looking at today, right? So the first scripture that I want to go to, I want to go into the blue letter. I want to go to the book of Daniel, the second chapter, and I'm going to be reading from the 40th verse. One second. The book of Daniel, the second chapter, and I'm going to be reading from the 40th verse. And it says, "And the fourth kingdom shall be strong as iron." And when it's talking about iron in the Bible, brothers and sisters, it's basically talking about the Roman Empire, right? So it says, "For as much as iron breaketh in pieces and subdueth all things," right? So what else is it talking about? It's really talking about how Rome is basically going to split as a nation, because not a nation, as a kingdom, because when we look at Europe today, we just look at it as Europe, right? But Europe was the old Roman Empire back thousand years ago. The Roman Empire was considered That's what we look at as quote unquote Europe. So during a period of time, Rome is going to split. I think they was in power for 1,000 some hundreds of years or something like that. I got to do more research on that. But they was in power for a very long time because Rome is considered the fourth beast of the Bible, right? So when it says, "For as much as iron breaketh in pieces and subdue all things," this is basically the nations when Rome fell as an imperial military power, right? And a political power. These nations, right? These different nations, they're going to come out of the Roman system, right? And they're going to come amongst the people, right? Or what we would call the indigenous people of different countries, different land masses. And see, these nations that's going to come from the north or Europe, we're going to be looking at what they would call the Canadians today. Because the Canadians are not really Canadians. I forgot what nation they really belong to, but this is what they call themselves when they come over here, right? Then you got what you would call the English. You got the French, right? You got the Scottish. You got the Spanish. All these different European nations that's going to come over here pushing what you would call religion, aka Christianity. But they're not just, they're going to push different forms of Christianity because even though they're coming over here, they're going to be they're going to be fighting, against each other because in the movie or the TV series called Primeval, there was a war between the Mormon Church against the United States government. And see, really, the United States government really represents Christianity. That's really what it represents. Because a lot of those folks back then, they were all Christians. But you had different forms of Christianity. So when it talks about, um, when it says, "And the fourth kingdom shall be strong as iron, for as much as iron breaketh in pieces, and subdue all things." This is basically the nations that's coming out of Europe. They're going to come amongst different land masses and different nations because this is what we're going to refer to this as the Renaissance period. Because during the Renaissance period, this is them conquering the indigenous people of different countries. And they're going to push what you would call white supremacy on them. And even though they may have referred to themselves as Christians or what you would call Protestants, Baptists, and all this type of stuff, Mormons, different denominations of Christianity, but they are all under the spirit and the characteristic of the Roman Catholic Church, aka the Roman Empire. So let's continue. It says, "And whereas thou sawest it says, for as iron breaketh in pieces and subdueth all things, and as iron that breaketh all these shall it break in pieces and bruise," because before they come over here, Rome had a split. I went too fast. Rome had a split before these people even come over here. Rome had a split. You had what you would call the western side of Rome and the eastern side of Rome. And I think that the western side of Rome was ruled by Constantinople, right? And I forget who the eastern side of Rome was controlled by. So eventually, Rome fell as an imperial power, but the nations that come out of Rome, whether they take on what you would call different Christian denominations, mainly what you would call the Protestant movement, and as you see in the series, it's going to be the Mormons. They're going to be involved in this just as well. And see, because what you would call Mormonism, um, the Amish, Protestants, and later on the Baptists, the Methodists, all these different Christian denominations. And also we can throw in, later on, we can throw in too Islam and Judaism. And why do you say that, Yahshua? Is because all of these different various of religions have removed the so-called Negro out of the pages of history, and they have put themselves in a position that they have no role. So it says, for as iron breaketh in pieces and subdue all things, and this is just basically Rome's rulership over the world, over the known world that she was ruling over. But eventually she's going to fall as an imperial military and political might, right? And she's going to transform herself into a religious imperial, um, a religious imperial might in the earth. And she's going to rule behind the scenes, and you're going to have a lot of these people. They're going to be pushing these different various of religions, but in actuality, they're still following the Roman Empire, aka the Roman Catholic Church. It says, and whereas thou sawest the feet and the toes, and what does the feet and the toes represent? The feet and the toes represents the 10 toes, or what you would call the 10 nations, or what they would call the European Common Market System of today. It wasn't always the European Common Market System. It metastasized into that. So what was the nations that was before the nations that we look at today? You had what you would call the Vandals. You had the Visigoths. You had the Hercules, right? You had these different nations that came up out of what you would call the Caucasus Mountains. See, you had the angelic sons. I forgot what their names was, but basically they was what you would call the Anglo-Saxons. So you had the Saxons. You had all these nations that came up out of the Caucasus Mountains. Uh, Later on, they be a part of what you would call the Roman Empire, and they started to rule and things of this nature, but they end up having the Roman spirit on them is because they're following Roman Catholicism um, in disguise in different variances of religion. So it says, and whereas thou sawest the feet and the toes part of potter's clay and part of iron, the kingdom shall be divided. Talking about the Roman Empire. And it says, but there should be in it of the strength of iron. So when you look at the TV series of what you would call the Mormons, or the name of it is Primeval, but the Mormons and you had basically the United States government. I think they was called the Confederates back then, but they were fighting against each other, but they was different variances of Christian religions. Is because you had different denominations of Christians that would come on the scene. They would create another denomination, and a lot of times the other people will look at them as a cult, and that's what they looked at the Mormons by. They looked at them as a cult, and because they didn't believe in the traditional ways of what the other people was believing in. So a lot of times when you're classified as a cult, especially back in those days, they'll kill you. See, they will kill the women, they'll kill the children, they will do a lot of things. So um, you saw the Mormons because they was afraid of the backlash that a lot of the other Christian denominations looked upon them as. They was in grave fear. And this would kind of like spark the war between the Mormons and what you would call the Confederates, or basically it's the United States government, you know. But it was a very good TV series, is because it shows you the characteristic and the nature of these people that came over here. See, we've been taught that in the school systems that the Indians and the Pilgrims came together. And you know, they came together under one consent. They sat down, they traded food with each other and stuff like that. That's not true history. See, what really happened was the so-called white man, when he came over here, see, he couldn't survive in the winter during that time. Not that he really couldn't survive, it's just that it was a new climate and he didn't know how to survive on this climate. So what happened was the Indians showed him, they showed the Caucasians how to survive in the winter. And what happened was they got amongst those people and they started to commit what you would call germ warfare. That's when they started to put smallpox in their blankets, and then they started to raise war against different fractions of um, what they would call Indians. But they weren't really called Indians back that time. They had different tribes like the Blackfoot and the Sioux and the Chippewa and all these different various of Indian tribes. And the history was bloody is because they killed children, they raped women, and a lot of things. Because I can show you different books on the original color of what you would call the Indians. They were darker than me, right? But because the the white man started to intermix and to rape the women, this is why a lot of them look the way that they look today. But the original quote unquote Indians, before they was wiped out or bred out of existence, they was dark skinned. It's because, and they looked at like, some of them look kind of like Asian looking, right? But, well, what is that? That's nothing but the residue of the so-called black man that was their forefathers or their ancestors before they came on the scene. So it's a lot of history that we really don't know about. That's why it's very important for us to go back and read this history, right? But let's continue. It says, and whereas thou sawest the feet and the toes, part of potter's clay, part of iron, the kingdom shall be divided, but there shall be in it of the strength of iron. For as much as thou sawest the iron mixed with miry clay. And what is the miry clay? The Miry Clay is the nations that was conquered by the Caucasians, right? So this is why when we looking at Primeval, or we go back and look at the 60 films and 30s films like with John Wayne, because you know John Wayne was classified as a savior in a sense. He was a warrior. He fought against the savages that lived in the country, but in actuality, they was the savages. See, they was the ones that was going amongst the people and killing them for their land and their livestock. You know what I'm saying? So this is what the history of the Renaissance has done. The Renaissance, the European Renaissance has classifies the white man as the pure man and the dark man as the savage, right? So it says 42, and as of the toes and of the feet were part of iron and part of clay, so the kingdom shall be partly strong and partly broken. And this is why you always hear, and you know, we got to start bringing out the truth of what people are saying. You know, this is why a lot of times you hear the elites when they talk about the new world order, right? Oh man, it's going to be a new world order. Well, what is the new world order? The new world order, brothers and sisters, is nothing more than the Babylonian mystery system. That's all the new world order is. It's because in actuality, we're already a part of it. It's just that it's hidden in plain sight. And a lot of times it's hidden via the political system. It's hidden via the religious system and the social aspect of living, how we interact with each other. This is why when we look at our women today, or we look at the men today, it's not a coincidence that our people is walking around with their pants off of their behind, or they drawers showing, or the woman, she has a savage behavior. She got a whorish type of behavior. That's not a coincidence. That is done on purpose. It's because as long as you keep your foot on people's necks, they can never rise up to the full potential that they supposed to be at in the first place, right? So this is what the system has done to our people. But let's continue. It says, and as the toes of the feet were part of iron and part of clay, so the kingdom shall be partly strong and partly broken. And whereas thou sawest the iron mixed with miry clay, they shall mingle themselves with the seed of man. And what does that mean? Just like I said, this is during the Renaissance period when the so-called white man comes amongst the people, right? And what was they pushing? They was pushing Christianity. It's because Christianity is supposed to be a religion. When we look at the term Christ or the term Christian, what does that mean? Christ only means anointed one. So what are the Christians telling you today when they profess themselves to be a Christian? They're telling you that they are anointed by the Creator to bring forth harmony and justice and equality in the earth. This is what they saying. Every time when you hear a person say that they're a Christian, or when they say they're a Muslim, when they say that they're a Jew, they're really telling you that they are the ones that submit themselves 100% to the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And that's an emphatic lie, brothers and sisters. And see, this is what, when it's talking about, whereas thou sawest iron mixed with miry clay, they shall mingle themselves with the seed of man. What does that mean? They're going to come uh, bearing gifts, which is their religion, but in the back of their pocket, they're gonna have what? They're gonna have the machine gun. That's what they're gonna have. And it says, but they shall not cleave one to another, even as iron is not mixed with clay. It's because why? We're looking at two elements. Oil and water don't mix. Iron and clay don't mix either. So what is the scripture really saying? It's saying that for a period of time, because in the book of Daniel, where are we at in the times of the Gentiles? We're at the toes, see? And the toes is symbolic of the European common market system, or the Europeans' rulership in the affairs of men. So when it says that basically iron and clay don't mix, for a period of time they're going to mix with each other. They're going to be, the people is going to follow the philosophy and teachings of the nations that has conquered them. And this is what has happened to us as a people. When we look at college today, yeah, we glorify going to Oklahoma, or we glorify going to Duke, DePaul, Stanford, all of these different prestigious colleges, whether they prestigious or they low level, right? Meaning you got public colleges. What are these colleges really? They're really colonial schools. And the job of the colonists or the colonialists is to educate the people in the philosophy of the conqueror. So when we look at Duke, do you know that Duke University and all these different universities, that they was originally colonial schools, and they're still colonial schools today to teach the masses their curriculum. So when we looking at Primeval, that is the beginning stages of what you would call, or the middle stages of the Renaissance period. Because I believe that the Renaissance period starts around, I believe, the 1400s. This is when the Europeans started to, what you would call, get a grip on the power structure, the power structure. Because before that, you had black people, they was ruling. You even had black people that was ruling in Europe. See, this is the history that they don't tell you, right? But see, really, Primeval is basically Daniel, the second chapter, 40 through 43. It's because it's talking about the final vestige of the Roman Empire, because that's what the pilgrims, this is what the Christians, this is what they represent. They represent the final vestige, or the final rulership of the European common market system, aka the Roman Empire. So with that being said, brothers and sisters, I hope you got something out of the lesson. Peace. Shalom.